got this example up here on the board. This is what I would consider to be a really great start to the project. Okay, so this would be a really great beginning stage of the project. I think a lot of times when people think about art, they just think about what it looks like in a finished state. And normally that's when you see artwork, is when it's finished. So you don't see what it looks like at the beginning. And I think that's where a lot of people get confused about, is they think that as soon as they start working on something, is that they should have something that looks finished within 5 minutes. And that's just not the case. It's a process, okay? So when you guys look at this, some things I want to point out to you is the way that they applied the oil pastel, okay? So if you look at this, you can see a lot of line work, okay? And you'll see a lot of should see a lot of line work on yours too. The other thing you should notice too is that you still see a ton of paper showing through. Again, that should be normal at the first or the beginning stages. Now if you guys look up on the board, our hope is that we have 3 to 5 very thin layers of oil pastel covering the entire surface, okay? And this is what I would think that would look like at that stage. All right, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to kind of point out a couple of things. So first let's talk about the way that they wrap the line. So when you do this, when you apply your oil pastels on your paper, you want to think about what is the form that I'm actually trying to portray here. So it's almost like if you had an apple in your hand and you literally took a marker and you had to draw lines around that apple, how would those lines curve and wrap around the form? If you pay attention to that, that's one way that you can make sure that your form looks accurate when in your drawing. Because if you guys look at like this star fruit, which I think is a great example to look at. If you look at the star fruit, you can see how when she did this project, she wrapped her lines around the form, okay? And so every color that she layered here was following this direction, okay? So she just kind of wrapped her lines around like that. And then when the form changes, her lines change. Okay? So you can see how she did that, okay? Same thing with the pomegranate. Now the pomegranate, or this isn't pomegranate, it's a dragon fruit. Dragon fruit's completely different form than the star fruit, right? So again, you're going to be wrapping your lines around it differently. So when you do this, you know, this is a different kind of form. You got to think about, you know, how would you wrap it around the form? And then here, you know, at the bottom it kind of changes. So should the lines, or the way that you're applying the media. And then it just kind of curves up again, like that, okay? So you want to think about the direction of your lines. Now, a little trick you can do is literally take your photograph, okay? If you're not sure about what direction you need to go, take your photograph and draw lines on it, okay? Test them out with just a pencil, just to see what direction you think works best. Then you're not going to hurt anything by doing that. You've already kind of outlined some of the outside edges, so you can go ahead and do that too. So there's that part. Now, one thing that I think she kind of took a misstep on a bit at the beginning of this is this edge right here. So if you guys look at that edge, this was something that I recall very vividly, that she had a hard time depicting the side from the top. And that she kept getting this edge, it kept blending out in a way. So she was having a hard time getting this little edge here to look like it's on the top and this to look on the side. I think one of the reasons why she struggled with that is because she actually drew these lines in the same directions of this. So as a result of that, it matched it, okay? So when you do this, again, you want to think about when the form changes, so should your lines. So I think she would have been better off going like this with these lines initially, and she would have been able to show that edge probably a bit better. Okay? Pass right there. All right. The next thing I want to talk about, and I want to talk about the construction paper too. This is another thing I think got a little messed up on this drawing at the beginning. So if you look at the ground here, so this is her construction paper. She's curving the lines a lot on that, and as a result, it makes it look like the actual construction paper is bumpy or has a lot of form to it. Again, the construction paper is flat, so it should have lines that reflect that. So rather than kind of curving the lines, she should have been just going at an angle and kept in straight lines like this. And there's a million different ways you could have done these lines. I wouldn't have gone straight across horizontally because, again, what you guys should remember from the contour tricycle drawing is that horizontal lines do not create movement. So anytime I need to create straight lines on a drawing, I always make sure that they're going at an angle to, again, just show more diagonals, okay? So that's how I would have changed that, all right? Now, everything looks like it's good. The other thing I want to talk about is how you layer up the color. Remember, guys, you want to remember about how to take advantage of your undertones. So anytime you have a color that needs to be light or bright, you need to start with a thin layer of white first. Now, the brighter that it needs to be, maybe the more white you add to your paper, okay? So you can adjust that. The other thing you want to remember too is what color that I said is your go-to when you need to darken something. That dark blue, which is the Prussian blue, okay? Now, things to consider with that is that sometimes when you're dealing with like an orange object or a yellow object, you do need to consider this, that if you were to put blue on any one of those two different colors, you're going to get something different. So if you put blue on top of yellow, what color do you think you're going to get? Green. If you put blue on top of orange, what color do you think you're going to get? Brown, right? Because blue and orange are complements, okay? So you do need to think about that. Some alternatives to that, okay, is to, if I was working with a yellow object, I would think about what's my next darkest warm color. So what's a dark warm color I could use on a yellow object? I could use orange. What else? Red. Okay, so I might go to those first, okay, and see how that works. I may still need to add blue in there in some parts, eventually just to make it a bit darker, okay? Now, if I'm working with an object that's a secondary color, so if I have an object that's orange, if it's violet, if it's green, I'm also going to have in my hand the two primary colors that were used to make that color. So, if I have a green object, what other color should I have in my hand? Blue and yellow. I'm going to use the yellow to lighten the green, and I'm going to use the blue to darken it. If I have an orange object, what other colors should I have in my hand? Red and yellow. I'm going to use the red to darken and the yellow to lighten the orange, okay? So on and so forth. Same thing with violet, okay? So these are the things that, you know, you guys got to take all that information that you learned in Fine Art 1 and you need to take it up a notch. Now you've got to take what you know and you have to apply it to your drawing, okay? So it's not as simple as you think. The other thing I want to point out is that on that back table with the oil pastels, I have scrap pieces of gray paper. So if you're not sure about what color or what you should be doing, practice on one of those first. Test out your ideas and then go start on your project, okay? So there you go. That's it. If you think you're ready, I want to see your finished scale and quad.